Welcome back. My name is Adrian.
My name's Aaron.
And you're listening to Teach One, the podcast where we take health and wellness topics that are seemingly difficult and simplify them with the goal of empowering someone to to learn and go forth and teach others.
Yeah, to teach one.
To teach one.
Fantastic.
Yeah, man. So I want to start by thanking everyone who follows us on our Facebook page. We reached 100 followers on there.
Yeah.
And now 100 people, some people will actually think 100, like, what's the deal, right? But, for me, it means a lot to have 100 people that care about what you're doing, especially when it's something that really started out as something that, you just care about. And, Aaron also did. Turns out that 100 people actually, do care about the same things we do. So, we're just really, really thankful. There's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears that have gone into doing what we do. We're still learning, and we're gonna keep, pushing and working, as hard as ever.
Yeah.
To further this and to take it, to bigger, better places, help more people, reach more people. Now that I've said that, we are going to be on YouTube as well. We've got Sam over here.
Hey, Sam.
Hey, what's up, guys? It's really, really going to take some getting used to.
It's interesting
to realize that.
Although
there's people looking at us right now.
Yeah, I always felt like I, had films and cameras in my future at some point. So it really didn't surprise me, to be quite honest with you. I don't know.
You know what? I've always told you should go and do some. Some what do they call them? Auditions. Yeah.
Yeah, and then somebody said that last week, and I was like, maybe I should do that. I don't know.
Try it out, man.
Yeah, it should be cool.
So like I said, thank you to everyone. Please join us on Facebook and on Instagram at TWO TEACHONE. That's TWO TEACHONE. That's to teach one. And you can reach us at our website at www.1.com.
To teach one.
Yeah, you can also find our social profiles on there, learn more about To Teach One. If you're enjoying the podcast, also leave us a review on whatever platform it is that, you listen on. Apple Podcasts, Stitcher. We're on quite a few at this point.
Yeah.
So leave us a review. It means a lot to us to hear what you guys have to say. We have you guys come up to us all the time and say, hey, we think what you're doing is great. You're making a difference. And we love that, but it also makes a huge difference for other people to hear what, you think. So, definitely leave us a review. It would help.
Absolutely. And, we're not just doing a podcast. We're creating a community.
Absolutely.
And that's a part of community, right?
Yes,
Getting involved, asking us questions.
Yes, it is.
Telling us we're doing a horrible job, a great job, whatever you think, we want to hear about it.
Absolutely. We'd love for you to be a part of shaping what this podcast, what this mission, it is and what it, morphs into.
Yeah.
And basically just be a part of the journey.
Yeah.
So definitely comment, and we really want to hear from you. And now you can also join us on YouTube.
Yeah.
The same handle, TWOTEACHONE. If you Google us, you'll find everywhere that we're at, whatever it is.
So if you Google us, what number are we in the Google selection?
First page, first result.
Really? Now that's pretty
flabbergasting. And just so difficult to attain for most.
Yeah, and we've already got it.
Turns out To Teach One was a great name to pick.
Yeah,
I'm so thankful about that. So anyway, so very thankful, and join us online. So a little recap. What did we talk about last week?
So last week we had Jacob on again for a second episode in a row.
Right.
And we talked a little bit about our philosophy when it comes to fitness and working out. We gave some tips, some tricks. We talked about it from a recovery standpoint because we were all in recovery. But it's useful for anybody that's just basically starting out, maybe from couch potato to, ripped Adonis or,
yes,
whatever your journey is.
Whatever your level is, right?
Yeah, you can find something useful in the podcast and some motivation, to move to a different level in your fitness routine.
Absolutely. We want to give you guys, the breakdown of what our journey was like in hopes that you would, avoid some of our mistakes.
Sure.
Injuries, that kind of thing. So
plus you can catch my proprietary blend for my bull testosterone cheetah ostrich.
The pre-workout.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty powerful stuff. Just remember, directly into the heart, you're going to need a friend to get through that chest plating. So just be careful out there.
Please consult your doctor before you try and do any of that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, obviously we're just joking about that. So today we have a friend of ours in the studio.
Oh yeah.
He is going to be speaking about his sobriety journey. We'll just have a general discussion around that. The reason we do these topics, especially this one, is just more for people that are in our recovery community to listen to. But more than that, we want people that are not in recovery, families, brothers, sisters, all those people in the community that would like to have a better understanding of why we're doing what we're doing, what the deal is, right? That's who we're really trying to reach, because so many of those people don't know what to look for. Education about this kind of thing goes a long way, right? So that's exactly why we're doing this. So his name's Vinny the Beard Sorise.
Yes.
Why is he called the Beard, Aaron?
Because you do not know what he's hiding.
In the beard.
In the beard.
Yes. He's actually Sicilian. We just gave him that name to, bring a little comic relief to this.
Right, yeah.
He's quite a sweet guy. What's up, Vinny?
Hi, Adrian.
What up?
How are you?
Good, man.
Good. Thank you for having me.
How you feeling about being here, man?
Good. A little nervous. Like I said, I've spoken a little bit, but never in a microphone.
Yeah.
So
That's
a little different, but it's cool.
Yeah, man.
It's cool.
Yeah, it'll be all right, man. After a few minutes, when the kind of conversation gets rolling, you'll forget that this thing is actually
It's even there. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'll do my best to remember to talk into it.
Into the microphone.
Into it, yes.
That's
I don't want
key.
to forget so much that I'm not talking into it anymore.
That is a good point.
Yes.
See, we know, once I'm in here,
Well,
this is how I move.
Right. You're like,
I just orbit the sun here.
I'll get a hang of it. We'll be good.
yeah. Oh, yeah.
You will. All right, man. So yeah, we're really glad to have you, and just hear a little bit more about your story. We haven't even told our stories yet. We'll have to figure out how we're going to approach that, but perhaps we'll do like a little video thing. We don't know. We're going to talk to Sam and see what how we'll approach that. But so what do you have for us, man?
Yeah, so, you guys invited me to come out here and speak, so, here I am, and I guess I'll give you a little background. My name's Vincent.
Yes.
Okay.
Vincenzo.
The beard.
The beard, yeah, okay. So, to start, I guess, I'm speaking on, my story and my kind of journey in recovery, so I guess I'll start with, I got sober October 30th of 2015, back in a town called Ann Arbor, Michigan. But before all of that, I was raised in a small town called Tecumseh, Michigan. I was the youngest of 3 kids. I was the baby of the family. I had an older brother and an older sister, and I was the youngest. So growing up was pretty blue-collar America, growing up in the Midwest. Nothing too crazy, and I think that's a good point is to reiterate is the fact that, addiction doesn't discriminate. I didn't come from like a broken family or like a rough upbringing or anything like that. My parents weren't alcoholics or addicts. They were great parents, good, hardworking. They're still both great parents, and I love them to death, and they've supported me, long before I ever got sober and continue to support me today. And I'm pretty fortunate for that, because I know there's a lot of people out there who may have or may have never struggled with addiction, who don't have their parents anymore in their lives. And so I feel very fortunate to have them as, big supporters of mine. But yeah, growing up, it was pretty good. Life was good. I grew up in a small town called Tecumseh, little farming community. I think the entire population might be, I don't know, I think it's under 10,000, maybe a little bit over 10,000, but small town.
Yeah.
Okay. Grew up there, and it was good. My dad was the Parks and Rec director, so I was involved in any sport you could imagine. I played it. Every season I was playing sports, so grew up playing a lot of sports. Very active. I started officiating soccer when I was like 12, when I was old enough to
Awesome.
to officiate the tot soccer. And I think, there's some laws where you can only work 6 hours a week. But, it was like, you want to officiate soccer, and basically it was making sure that the kids didn't score in their own goal, because they're like,
Right.
they're like 3 years old, they don't know what direction they're going or what they're doing. And it was just kind of, you're there to just kind of keep everyone shuffled in the rectangular area where the soccer game's supposed to be happening. But,
Right.
yeah, so sports was a big part of my childhood. I was always active in something. And, wrestling was a big thing for me. I started wrestling when I was 5, and I wrestled all through high school and got offered a few scholarships after high school, but I was kind of wild. So I was like, nah, I didn't have the discipline. But growing up, stayed very busy, did well in school. Yeah, everything was good, and then I'd say summer of 8th grade was when the first time I started to really experience drugs or alcohol for the first time in my life. Yeah, I remember summer of 8th grade, and we were kind of hanging out, and we had found, somebody had some pot or something like that, and we, I remember smoking pot and thinking, this is cool, and having a few beers, and that was cool, everything was okay. But I remember that very clearly, the first time that I really felt like, when you listen to enough people in recovery, they talk about this moment where they feel like they found something that made them feel not so unique anymore and like they could fit in. And for me, that was my buddy's mother had sickle cell anemia. I think I'm saying that correctly. I apologize if I'm not. But and so she had Oxycontin, and I remember at 9th grade taking that. That was the first opiate I'd ever taken, was Oxycontin. And I just remember loving it, It just was such a good feeling, and I remember always wanting to feel that way. I never wanted to not feel that way. And so, yeah, and she had a lot of pain meds. And so and this was younger, and, we didn't realize that, the deeper our addictions got, or my addiction got, that there was value in this stuff, so it was more childhood stuff where, it was free and it was fun, and nobody realized that, people are paying money for this stuff where we're just stealing it out of a medicine cabinet,
Right.
And, so yeah, I, continued to go through high school. I guess I should back up a little bit. I got in, so there was a lot of signs that I should have seen coming that this wasn't going to work out well. I got my first DUI when I was 16. I had a license for maybe 6 months, and we were drinking at a friend's. They owned a restaurant, and we went in there after hours, and somebody called the cops, and we got arrested for it. And I was sitting in a car when we got arrested, and then I got arrested 2 more times before I turned 18. So I was still in high school. I got arrested 2 more times for minor in possession of alcohol, which I ended up going to a juvenile detention center for a while. And I also, since it's your third offense when you're in high school, you can't, they kick you off sports teams, right? You get suspended, or you get put on a probation period. And since I was so active in wrestling, I was one of the captains of my wrestling team, and I didn't want to take a year off because the third time they're like, you can't do any sports for a year. So I went to a different school for my junior year of high school, and continued to wrestle over there because I didn't want to miss out on any years of that. And then came back to my my school, Tecumseh, and graduated from there, and also wrestled through there, which, I, and here's a good, and I try not to glorify, there was a lot of stuff that happened in between all of that, drug use and things like that. But, one thing that was really clear to me at, 18, that I started to see, that I knew I was going down a road that I didn't want to go down, but I didn't know how to slow, I didn't know how to stop that motion, that action was set in motion, and I just didn't know how to stop it.
Right.
And I guess, I didn't see where it was going to lead me, but something in the back of my mind told me this isn't good, but it felt so good that I couldn't, I couldn't see, I couldn't see the negative consequences that were coming down the pipeline.
Right.
And, but I remember being at the high school, wrestling state tournament where like, this is like the pinnacle of everything you know, since I was 5 years old, this is like, you know, I'm in the individual state wrestling tournament. You know, I got the potential to, the potential to maybe be a state champ, right? You know, and I'm at this tournament. It's like 3 days long, and I remember telling myself I'm not going to take any opiates while I'm here. You know, like I want to be on top of my game, and I couldn't make it through that weekend without doing, taking painkillers, and that was a real red flag to me. That like, man, they talk about like when you want to stop, but you can't stop,
right?
And I had no 12-step fellowship whatsoever in my brain at this point. So I didn't really realize that this was something that people would in my future tell me that, hey, this is kind of what qualifies you to have a substance abuse problem.
Right.
Is, the feeling of, hey, I want to stop, but I can't, and I don't know how to.
So just a quick question, right? Before you go past that. So were you, at this point, was it like a physical? Because I remember the first time I realized like it was a physical like addiction, right? Because it's one thing to the habit, right? Because the habit and that kind of builds over time, and that's how at some point you end up being physically, addicted, right? Mm-hmm. So were you at that point, or was it just uncomfortable not having it, like like mentally?
No, I think it was physical at that point.
Okay.
Yeah. Mentally, it was definitely uncomfortable, but I also, it's been a while now too. That was also, about almost 13 years ago now. Yeah. But I'm pretty sure at that point it was physical too, and I just, I kept doing them, right? And I did okay in states, I placed and all that, but just that idea of, not wanting to do it, and did it again. And the thing was too, is I'd already had a lot of consequences for substance abuse or, misuse of substance at that point. At 18 years old, I've already been arrested 3 times for drugs or alcohol. It's like,
right,
this should be a sign right here. And, I just didn't see it. I moved to Florida when I turned 20, and, with a girlfriend of mine, we moved down there, and I thought, get out of this small town, see some of the world or America, see some of the states, see something different. And going from Michigan to Florida was kind of a big change, and it opened my eyes up to a lot of things about how sheltered of an area I grew up in, and it kind of changed my perspective on the world and on the United States in general, and just realizing that, wow, this place is a lot bigger than that little 3 stoplight town you were raised in, and so that was a really cool experience. But I continued to use drugs and alcohol down there, and it didn't really slow down. My girlfriend at the time had gotten pregnant, so we came back to Michigan, and I remember, we came back to Michigan when we found out she was pregnant, because we wanted to be closer to our family. And I remember saying, I'm going to be a dad, right? So like, I'm not going to do this stuff. And so like, I tried to abstain for a while, and I held off for like 3 or 4 months, and she miscarried. And I remember thinking like, and I was off to the races again. I couldn't stop again. I started using, it got worse. I just, it wasn't good. I kept continuing to use, didn't slow down. And, that between the loss of that child and me continuing to use drugs and alcohol, that actually destroyed that relationship to where, it just didn't work anymore, and we went our own ways. But, so that was like 21, 22, and I, continued to use for another, I got sober at 27. So, another 6 years, I just kept, getting worse and worse. I remember having these ideas where, these mental ideas where like, I'm not going to do this. Like, if I do this, I'm not going to steal from my mother, right? Like, when I steal from my mother, that's crossing the line. And then like, I would wash away that line and like draw it again a little further back, right? You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not going to steal my dead mother's wedding ring, and then you do some horrible stuff. And it's just, and when I was in the grips of my addiction, I just couldn't see a way to stop. I had no solution to this problem, and my my solution or my answer was just to continue. You know, I didn't know how to slow down or get out of it. And I should mention too, you know, growing up, I watched my older brother struggle with drug addiction. My brother was 5 years older than me, and watching him, you know, struggle all through high school and all of his adult life, you know, same stuff, you know. And I remember growing up and saying I never wanted to be like that, you know. Like I told myself, if there's something I can do, it's not to be like my brother. You know, most people like look up to their older brother, right? Like, you know, as sad as it sounds, you know, I didn't really look up to him because he didn't give me a whole lot to look up to, you know. It was like, man, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. I don't want to be, you know, and it was tough, you know, and I always loved him, but it was just, I saw these actions that he was doing, and I saw how it hurt my parents too. You know, I watched how they would stay awake at night worrying about him, or, you know, the countless stories that I'm not going to bore you with. Well, they're actually not boring. They're super entertaining, but we won't go down that road. But he was my brother's name was Santino, and I miss him every day, you know, but he was a wild man, you know, and he had some great stories. He was a real character. But yeah, so I guess, you know, to kind of move forward, and just kept getting worse and worse. And you know, it would have been September 16th of 2015. I was living in Colorado, right? So I had moved from Michigan to Colorado with the hopes of like just getting out of Michigan. You know, it was just depressing. It was hard to find a job. So I literally booked a one-way flight to Colorado with a backpack, and that was it. Like, and I was like, and you know, my family was so desperate for me to like just get back on my feet that they were like, yeah, if that's what you think's going to help you, go ahead, you know. And like, and they were like supportive of it because nothing was really going good in Michigan. So I came out here, and I spent about a year out here, and that's when I really started getting into like, you know, harder drugs. You know, started to do you know, more serious opiates. You know, started to do heroin, things like that. And it just got progressively worse. Started spending time with people that I never wanted to be around, you know. And about a year after I moved out here, that's what I was leading into, was on September 16th, I got a call, and my dad was like, your brother is in the hospital, and they don't think he's going to make it through the day. You need to fly back to Michigan. So I flew back to Michigan, landed there in the Detroit International Airport. Went to the hospital, and, you know, and I was so bad in my addiction. I remember telling my dad I needed to stop at the gas station to buy cigarettes, right? And, like, on the way to the hospital. So we stopped there, and, like, it was like a liquor store / gas station, whatever. And, like, buying liquor, you know, like, I couldn't go more than, you know, I couldn't make it 6 hours without having something in me, whether it was pot, opiates, you know, benzos. I was, you know, a full-fledged addict and alcoholic, you know, and I just could not stop. And like, okay, here's a situation where like you need to be there for your family, right? Like you need to be supportive of your mother and your father and your sister,
right?
And like be a productive member of your family in a tough time where we don't know what's going to happen to my older brother. And I just couldn't, you know, I couldn't stop using. I couldn't get out of myself long enough to do what I needed to do, or I should have done, looking back on it, to be a supportive brother and a supportive son, and you know. And so I went to the hospital. I got drunk, and I didn't make a fool of myself that night or anything bad, you know. I just drank because I couldn't be sober, and I needed to. You know, noon, it was like 11:15 the next day, Santino passed away, and yeah, you know, it was really hard. You know, my mother's sister has died from this disease as well. She struggled with drugs and alcohol for a long time, died at 27, I believe. And my brother passed away at 32, and my mom's other sister is in recovery. And my mom doesn't have a substance abuse problem, but so there's a history of it there, you know. And so I went back to Colorado, spent about 3 or 4 days in Michigan, went back to Colorado, and kind of had resigned to the idea that, like, they all said, you know, this was what was going to happen to my brother if he kept living this way. Right. And it happened. You know, he passed away. He died of this. And, you know, and everybody said, you're going down that same road. You know, you're gonna wind up like him if you don't stop. so I kind of just accepted that. So, like I said, I got sober October 30th. My brother passed away September 16th. So I don't know what the math is on that, but like 45 days, something like that, right between the day my brother died and the day I got sober. I got sober like 45 days after he passed away. But, you know, the crazy thing is like the insanity of our addiction. Like I continued to do the same stuff that he did that took his life, thinking that, you know, I don't know what I was thinking, what I was going to solve. And at that point, you know, I was just kind of, you know, checked out of life. I didn't really want to be, you know, I definitely didn't want to be sober. I didn't know how I was going to continue to maintain getting high like I was. And I didn't see any way out of it. And so, you know, my family offered me this opportunity to come back to Michigan to go to a treatment center. And I said, you know, I'm not going to do that. You know, I don't want to do that. I remember I ran out of money and ran out of stuff to sell. Anything, you know, any value, everything that I had any value in, I had pawned it and sold it, you know, and I couldn't keep a job because I'd be getting dope sick, you know, or, you know, whatever the case may be hung over the next day and miss work, or just, you know, couldn't get high in the morning. So now I'm sick. So I can't go to work to make it through an 8-hour day.
Right.
So I couldn't maintain a 9 to 5 or any sort of semblance of a regular job. So I was like, hey, called my family up and I said, hey, I want the help. And they said, okay. So I went back to Michigan the same way I left Michigan, you know, with a backpack about a year later. And yeah, that was October 29th. I checked into a detox center in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And I remember this guy, Phil, man, I really looked up to him. He's also passed on since then, but I'll never forget what he told me. He was a guy in recovery. He said, this is going to be the first day of the rest of your life. And I like remember that shit, man. It was like real powerful, you know, and this was a dude who had like done like serious prison time and like was like 5-6 years clean, you know, and was going back to get like his, like some sort of, counselor degree or, a psychology degree. Right. And this just shows how strong this disease is. He ended up, you know, relapsing like 7 years sober and died, you know, and this was a guy who was doing my intake in a detox center. Right. You know what I'm saying? So like, this is the reality of what I and other people in sobriety are dealing with. You know, that's why, you know, they talk about having like, you know, rigorous honesty, and doing, you know, not being able to rest on our laurels. Like I firmly believe in that kind of stuff that I can't, you know, I was so sick when I came in. I didn't even know what laurels meant. I thought they were talking about morals, you know, and I was like, what does that mean? But I learned that, you know, and so, yeah, I did the detox thing. They suggested I do a 90-day treatment. So I did the 90-day treatment. I got a sponsor. I took the suggestions, man. I don't know what else to say. And I also think I was ready. You know, I think there's a fine line that I'd gone to a lot of AA and NA and different 12-step fellowship meetings and tried to seek help, or thinking that I would walk into one of those meetings one day and I'd hear something that was going to change my life, or I'd get the right job or the right girlfriend, and it would change my life. And it never happened. You know, it just never happened. And life just beat me down enough to where I was like in a state of reasonableness, and I was willing to listen to someone else. And they said, do these things, you know, they say, you know, try to help others, you know, try to, you know, get a sponsor, you know, work the steps and, get a service commitment, all the suggestions you hear. And I started taking them, and, life started getting better. I spent that 90 days in that treatment center. You know, I picked up my 90 days or whatever in there, and they said, you know, go to transitional, go to sober living for 6 months. And I said, okay, you know, I'll do it for a while. And, so I did that for a while, and, I got kicked out of sober living, right, for hanging out with this girl who was also in a sober living house. So, you know, don't suggest that to anybody, but it was fine. But the thing, you know, the crazy thing is that I was doing the right thing, and I got myself involved with people in the program. And, so when they saw what happened and they knew I didn't use or drink over, you know, I wasn't getting kicked out for using or drinking. I had like 3 people who were like, got a room. Like, we got you, man. Like, you need a place to stay. Like, I'll rent you a room, you know? And like, that showed like the power of like doing the right stuff. Like, maybe I'm not going to sit here and say I was any sort of a saint and I did the right thing all the time, but like, I'd say 90% of my actions I was taking at that point in life were the right thing, you know, and people saw it and they saw something changing in me, and here were people willing to help, you know. And so I took up a friend's offer on that, and I stayed with him. And you know, I like to mention him because he was also very influential in my recovery. His name was Chris Riley, and he used to come. He had a bunch of German shepherds, and he'd come up to this treatment center, and he would he'd bring these dogs up, and they did these like little peer visits where like people in recovery would come visit newcomers at the treatment center to just like, hey, what's up, man? What are you doing? Like, how'd you get here? Like, just to get to know people, right? And I just was like, fuck this guy, man. Like, he was always like all happy, and he had like a mohawk, and he was just like, and he had these big German shepherds that were always jumping on me, and I'm like, dude, get these dogs away from me. And I was just like, and I was miserable, right? You know, I'm like 2 weeks sober, you know, and my brother's just died, you know, like I am not in a good state of mind, right? So he'd start calling me Shitty Vinny, right? He came up with a nickname for me. He called me Shitty Vinny because I had such a piss poor attitude. And, and I just couldn't stand him. And that was the guy who ended up opening his home up to me when I got kicked out of transitional and letting me live with him, right? Wow. Awesome dude, man, right? He was just the biggest, kindest dude I've ever met. He was like a private contractor in Afghanistan as a mechanic. He was a mechanic out there and fixed the Humvees and stuff like that. Just a super nice guy. Anytime somebody get kicked out, as long as you'd stay sober, like you had a couch in his house. You know, He was just like the epitome of doing service work, or like this was his way of like giving back to the program that had given him so much, right? And so he put me up, put another guy up, who got sober the same day as I did, in detox. And so we were all living, me and this dude who got sober the same day as each other, were living there, and Chris was living there. Obviously, it's his house. And then, so it was literally like a year after my brother had passed away. So it was like September 6th or September 4th. I'm sorry, I can't remember the exact date. But of 2016, Chris passed away of a heart attack at work. And I believe he was 31 or 32. A couple of years sober, you know, passed away. And I remember getting that call, and they were like, and I was at a meeting actually. And they said, you know, Chris, you know, didn't make it. He was at work today and passed away. And it was just like unreal, you know, like one of the nicest guys I'd ever met. Yeah. You know, he opened his home up to me. He was just constantly doing, you know, I don't know what else to say about him. Anybody who knew him, you know, there's no need to go on and on about, you know, this guy being a saint. We all knew how great of a dude he was. Yeah. But, you know, a pretty prolific thing that came out of that for me, that was like kind of a starting point for trying to grasp what spirituality was to me, was we were at his funeral, right? And, you know, I was pretty salty, and I was like, you know, like, if God's real, like, why would he, you know, take somebody who's so good, you know, you let this guy go overseas, and, you know, he wasn't fighting in the war, but he's spending time in a war zone. He makes it, you know, comes home safe and sound, and goes through some kind of wild stuff in his alcoholic use and his addiction, and gets sober, and now he's giving back to the community, and, you know, talking about a sense of community. This guy was like the embodiment of like somebody who made you feel like a part of whatever he was doing. He was just a great dude. And so I was like just bitter. I was like, you know, why is that? And, and the pastor or the preacher, I can't remember what it was, but at his funeral was like, instead of asking yourself why God took Chris from you, ask yourself why God put Chris in your life. And like that totally like changed everything for me in that moment, because I was like bitter, and I was like, you know what, like, Vinny, like, you didn't even deserve to like share space on this earth with this dude, right? Like, you were a low bottom drunk and alcoholic, and you didn't like deserve to be in the, you know, to get to know this guy. And like, because of sobriety in my life and because of sobriety in his life, it brought us together, and we got to share this little moment in time and like learn from each other and like live life clean and sober. And like, and he was just a great example of what it meant to be, you know, a male in recovery who was doing the right thing. And like, you know, he was going to bed at night and, you know, sleeping like a baby because he wasn't hurting people. You know what I'm saying? He was, and he wasn't just, you know, sitting in a meeting talking all this shit about how great he is, you know, and then leaving and, you know, going and cheating on his girlfriend or something. He was living it, you know. He was just, he was a solid person. And so I was really fortunate to be able to meet him and get to experience, a short time in life with him. And he'll always have a lasting effect on my life, man. That was just that first year of sobriety, man, was a real trip. My mom also spent, 17 days in a coma in the hospital. And, I went through all this stuff in my first year, not to mention, a couple handfuls of people that passed away that, I was getting sober with, and really sad stories too that there's no need to tell. But, that first year was a trip, man. And I somehow was able to stay sober through it. After Chris passed away, my roommate, went back out and started drinking 2 days after it, so now the guy who, has kind of laid this foundation for me has passed away. My other roommate is now drinking, and now we're living in somebody's house who isn't here anymore. It was a bizarre situation, man. It really was. So I got out of that, moved in with a couple other guys, came out to Colorado, and I guess I should back up and start, because I kind of forgot to mention that, while in treatment, I had started working the steps, and through all of this, I've had a sponsor and was continuously working the steps. That was pivotal. And if it wasn't for the people who showed me what it means to be a productive member of a 12-step fellowship, I wouldn't be where I'm at today, and I wouldn't be able to sit here and share some sort of message of, hope and strength with you guys. Hopefully there's some hope and strength in this talk, but, I wouldn't be able to do any of that if it wasn't for these guys who took the time out, the guys who would pick me up from treatment and they'd buy me, a Red Bull and a pack of cigarettes and never let me give them $1 for it. And I wouldn't even ask for it. And they do it every time. And, I didn't realize these guys, were working a 9-to-5 job, and then they're driving 35 minutes out of their way to pick me up from treatment, take me to a meeting, drive me back to treatment, and then drive home. This guy's eating up his whole night to help some dude who probably isn't going to stay sober, but he's still doing it.
Yeah.
Why is he doing it? I didn't understand why, but now I do, because it wasn't, we help others to help ourselves, right? And, I just found a real sense of community back in Michigan, and, but I wanted to come back to Colorado too, so I told these people, I'm going to come back. I said, I'm going to go out to Colorado, and my family and everybody was supportive. And the guys whose opinions really mattered to me said, hey, as long as you plug yourself in and you stay connected, and don't get too far from where you came from, in the sense of recovery, they said, you're going to be just fine. And I did exactly that, and with a lot of grace, I'm still here today sharing this story with you guys and working with a handful of guys. And I still got a sponsor out here, and worked the steps with him last year, and, stay in constant contact, and life has just gotten exponentially better. Yeah. And that's kind of where I'm at today. And I've skimmed over stuff, and I'll listen to this, and I know I forget, a bunch of stuff I wish I would have said, but I don't, I don't regret getting sober. It was the best thing in my life, hands down, the best thing I've ever done for myself. And, when I was ready to be honest and give it 100%,
right.
There was a point where it no longer feels like work, I feel grateful to be able to sit here and talk with you guys. I never thought that anybody would want me to share anything, other than drugs, and I wasn't going to share those.
I know.
And,
right.
These are mine.
You know what I'm saying? So I feel really fortunate, and, somebody told me it's not too many people get to live two lives in one lifetime, and I really feel like that, I feel like I've really gotten this opportunity to live two very different lives, and I don't want to look back, and I don't want to take it for granted either. So,
Yeah, that's a great story.
Yeah.
And I like what you said. I'd never heard that, but yeah, it literally is like two lives when you get sober.
Yeah,
and
I'm writing it down right now because it just
powerful.
blew my mind,
Yeah.
man. And it's so true. Yeah.
And I'm sure he stole it, but this is a guy, Tony Houston, back in Michigan. I stole that from him. I was told after you give him credit twice, it's no longer stealing, it's mine now. But I'll give him credit on the air for that one. But he was one of those guys, man. We were wild kids together. He was a grade above me, man, and now he's like the epitome of one of those great stories. He probably 7-8 years sober, clean and sober now. Yeah. couple kids, and now he's sitting in a treatment center somewhere working with the sheriff's department as a substance abuse counselor. Just like a complete success story, you know? Wow. And he was one of those guys when I was growing up and I thought I was being crazy. I was like, whoa. I was like, that dude is wild.
This dude's messed up.
And when I got clean and sober, he was one of the first people I called, and he was just more than happy and just a stand-up guy. But yeah, so that was who I stole that line from.
I like that.
Hey, I like it a lot.
Yeah. I had a question, because I know this is from my personal experience, but did you have like a moment or a couple in high school where you noticed that your use was different from the people around you? Like, because everybody, I know for me, you know, I was with a group and they all partied. And I remember for me, they couldn't understand why once we got a bunch of beer and some drugs, why I was still like, hey, we need to get more. You know, did you find that you stuck out kind of in that way amongst your peers, even though that you were all drinking and using?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, there was a few, well, like, you know, for that example of, you know, even being in the high school, you know, wrestling tournament, not being able to do that, you know, and I remember, you know, leaving and constantly smoking pot. You know, that was a big thing. I smoked a lot of pot, you know, and couldn't make it through a day without smoking pot, where, like, you know, we're sneaking out on lunch break, you know.
Yeah,
right.
And people are like, dude, let's just wait till we get out of school, you know. And I'm like, no. You know, and you know, like I said, I mean, my track record, having, you know, 3 MIPs before you turn 17, it was just like, yeah, dude, like, clearly
there was
you are slightly different. And,
right.
you know, and it was weird because I kind of I never felt like I used like other people. Like, I knew I used differently. Like, you know, from the very beginning, and I'd watch my brother, you know, the way he would. I remember one night we were all drinking. My brother was classic. If you'd buy him a beer, he would buy you whatever you wanted when he was 21 and we were, you know, or whatever, he was 22 and we were 17, 16, whatever. As long as you bought him some, he'd get you some, right? So, but I remember him, like, I remember everyone passed out and seeing him, like, grab liquor that was still left and it wasn't his. I remember getting mad. And now that I look back on it, like, that's what addiction is. Like, here's somebody who's like, everyone's passed out. Like, it's not fun. There's nothing fun. You're sitting up alone, wasted, drinking more. Like, and you're not getting any more wasted. Like, that's like the reality of where the drinking gets you and the drugging. Like, there's no solution in that. And I saw that and I didn't understand what that meant, you know, and now I understand that that's what an alcoholic looked like, was somebody who, when everyone else stopped drinking, they kept drinking, you know, and that was kind of I look at that now and I realize what that was, and I saw myself in that point, you know, even, and it wasn't so much in high school, but, you know, after high school, it became appallingly clear to me, like, that, you know, you don't drink and use like other people do recreationally, you know?
Yeah.
Right.
And so my solution to that was I stopped hanging out with people who used recreationally.
Exactly.
And I surrounded myself with people who use drugs and alcohol like I did.
Right.
And then you didn't feel so weird because everyone was high all the time or drunk all the time. And so, you know, I felt like that was the norm. You know, I put myself in positions to feel like this is how we live, you know?
Yeah, it's so interesting because even within all the dysfunction of what that life is like, right? You went from being in one community where now you're using with these people and they're using in a more normal manner, right? But then you realize, okay, I'm a little bit different. I need a new community where I feel like I fit in, you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So community is in very many ways, it's always a factor, right? But then at our worst, I know it was definitely that way for myself. I wasn't trying to hang out with anyone really, you know, unless that they had something that I needed, right? So I was just hanging out, you know, Netflix, whatever, Hulu. It was just me, you know, my herbs and my drink, man, you know, most of the time, you know, and my dogs, but they didn't know any better, man. They just loved me for who, you know, it didn't matter, man. You know, they don't see any of that, you know, but I think that is it's so interesting to look at that, right? That there's always some kind of, you're always looking to fit in, you know, with some kind of group, right? Until you're not, until it's just this like completely consuming thing where, you know, you're just alone. Like you can't even relate to other people, you know, nor do you want to. You're just so self-indulged, you know?
You know, and I think it's been such a 180, like I've said before, because the sense of community, you're talking about this podcast and this idea of health and community is overwhelming today. Like the amount of support and the feeling of a purpose I have today, you know, and I don't get a sense of purpose in my 9 to 5, but like outside of that,
right.
Like that's where I feel like this is what I'm supposed to be doing today, you know, and whether it's, you know, trying to, you know, hold the door for somebody or taking the time out to, you know, come down here and do this with you guys, you know, and there's just the opportunities. And, you know, the thing I've been able to do in recovery is also see, I don't know if, for lack of a better word, like the blessing of being sober, or these moments in life where I might have taken it as like a coincidence, but it's like now I know that this isn't a coincidence. You're here, right here and right now to do something, whatever it may be, whether it may be to be, you know, of usefulness to the guy whose car is broke down the side of the road just to get out and push his car out of the intersection, or whether it's to ask a coworker, hey man, you doing all right, when he's being a jerk to me and I want to lash out on him and say, dude, you know, what's your deal, man? You know, I haven't done anything to you. Why are you treating me like this? Where it's like, okay, like this has taught me to have like love and tolerance for other people, and I understand that like you don't know what's going on with this person, and chances are, I know I'm so self-centered, I think it probably has to do with me, but really 90% of the time whenever somebody's being mean to me, it has nothing to do with me. And I am not that important in that person's life for them to let their day being ruined over me, you know. And just I don't know, man, it's been a really fun thing. And when I can be present enough to realize that stuff happens for a reason, I can seize that moment. But even today, like I'll see, I had a couple things happen to me over the week, you know, like stupid little things, right? So we're painting the house, right? And I'm all stressed out about the cost of paint, right? You want to paint the whole house? Right. I'm like, the whole house? You know
how much it's going to cost?
Yeah, and I like, that's my immediate thought. And we go to Sherwin-Williams, 40% off all paint from the 20th to the 22nd.
Wow.
Yeah.
You know, like, and it might not be like major things, but like I have so many, like, that's the only one that comes to my mind like immediately right now, because that literally happened today. But like almost on a daily basis, I'll have situations where like, and it talks about it in the book, you know, that like financial securities will leave us. And I don't know if they have left me, but like when I take the hands off the wheel and like believe that like everything will be okay, and like you haven't came this far to get dumped off yet, like things are all right. Like, just like I said, like that little story of the paint, man, like that was just awesome, you know. And I was like, that's so cool. And you know, the fact that on moving day, I'm worried about everyone helping move, right? I had more than enough help.
Yeah.
Everything went super smooth, you know. And it's just like, I don't know, man, I get tons of these little opportunities to be grateful for what I have, you know, and to also realize that, like, you know, 3.5, almost 4 years ago now, where I'm at, it's just everything that I have as a problem today is like a high class problem.
Yeah,
first
world.
Yeah, and then it's not even a problem. It's just like, okay, what are we going to do about it? It's not a problem. It's like, okay, how are we going to create a solution to this?
Right.
So, you know, I'm trying to think of a couple more of them little like gems, but you know, that was a good one today. Just a little, a nice reminder to me that like, hey man, like have a little faith that everything's going to be okay, and stop trying to control everything.
Right.
You know, because I'm always trying to control everything. It doesn't matter, you know, what the situation is. You know, I want to make sure that it plays out just how I want it to play out, and because I know what's best, you know, and and I've learned that by not listening to myself, some of the best things that have happened in my life, I had zero hand in it.
Right.
You know,
I totally feel that, because I'll tell you right now, everything that's happening in my life currently was never the plan.
Right.
Not once did I ever think that I was going to be, you know, working with other men, you know, who are trying to get their lives on track. I mean, none of it, man. None. Zero.
Did you ever think you'd be sitting here doing a podcast?
None of it.
None.
Dude, no, absolutely not. Absolutely not. I was talking to someone yesterday about this very thing, and I just I said something about how actually I was hanging out with Owen. We went out to lunch, and I was just telling him, it's kind of like riding the wave, right? There's the high points, low point. There's all these different parts, and like recently things have been quite rocky. In previous years, I haven't had a lot of crazy things happen, but like this year so far, quite a couple things have happened that, were really, really, tough to get through. But I was like, you know what? Everything in my life is pretty good when it's all said and done. I have nothing to do with it. It's like, everything I was doing in the past, everything I thought was going to fulfill me and sustain me was absolutely not what it was about. I wanted to go to business school, to make a lot of money, have a trophy wife, a Ferrari, a cool Doberman, just walk on on my perfectly manicured, all these things, like this narrative, right? It's like the Step Brothers. What was that thing anyway, I'm not going to say what they said, but that was my idea of what was going to be, I don't know, a good life, right?
Yeah.
And so that was it, but that wasn't really at the core of it. I have like the spirit of like a servant, right? I like to, serve my fellow man. Somehow the universe found a way to get me to a point, like to humble me and to kind of, it was kind of like a life boot camp, right? It just beat me down real quick and built me back. It was like, okay, now let me serve up to you, something that I think you can work with. Let me take you back to where you're supposed to be, and all the opportunities I needed, came to me, None of it has been my plan, at all.
Yeah, I think you're definitely right, and it's funny because every time I think that something's not going to work out, it does. But even knowing that, it still doesn't. I guess that's where when we start talking about, when I talk about me needing to grow spiritually, it's this idea of, having some faith, because I'll catch myself in these moments where it's like, I can't possibly see how this is going to be a good outcome. Sure. And I get like full of fear and like, I just, want to control it and like, okay, we can't. And it's like, time and time again, life has proven to you that if like you do the right next action, like you just get up in the morning, put your shoes on, start walking forward, try to be kind, try to be caring to other people, try not to hurt people, and do what you woke up and you're supposed to do today. Like, I've gone to bed and like, it's like, yeah, it turns out fine. Sometimes it turns out better. Sometimes it turns out worse, but like, I'm okay. And like, yeah, I didn't do anything dumb to where I can't come back from it, you know? And like, that's the thing too, like with recovery, I've had some friends who have struggled from time in and time out. And, this guy was like, I had a friend of mine who I just deeply care about and it just wouldn't click for him. And he said, I can't do this anymore. I've messed up too much. And I said, what have you done that you can't come back from? Yeah. And I think that really hit him hard. He was like, yeah, maybe you're, I don't know if he said you're right, but it made him think, and he was like, like and today it's like, if I were to, lose it all, you can still come back, man. Like, absolutely. So true. And it's like, I think some of the people who are the most successful people that I've met in recovery and in life in general, they come back for some real adversity. My girlfriend's mother and father, for example, she told me this wild story of how they tried to scoop up a business during the recession and they just failed miserably. And I don't think it was really them poor management, just the time, 2008, it's the recession. The guy obviously was selling it for a reason, but, and the amount of debt and adversity they overcame and to see where these people are at today. And these aren't people who struggle with addiction, but just what, what you can come back from is unbelievable. And the resilience is just like, as a human being, like, what are you going to make out of it? Are you going to make these, like this Chris situation, losing Chris, like, instead of using it as like a really sad story, I use it as like motivation. And like, that's why I never forget to talk about him and my brother. Like, and even with my brother and saying, he didn't have, the most positive influence in my life. Like he was the reason why I got sober. You know, I remember being in a treatment center and my sister saying, "Hey, it's just me and you now.
Right.
Like, what are you going to do?"
Yeah.
You know, and that shit hit home with me. I was like, you're right. Like, it's just me and you. And like my parents are sitting here. Their one son has just died. Their other son's in a drug and alcohol treatment center.
Yeah.
And their sister, my sister's doing fine, but still it's like, what are you going to do? Like, when is enough enough? When has life given you enough shit where you're like, I don't want anymore. Like, somebody told me that, you can either get humble or let life humble you. And like, I wasn't willing to get humble.
No,
I let life humble me.
Yeah.
But, that's what it took,
Yeah.
and like,
Yeah.
I don't know. I catch myself getting lost in these, the self-centeredness too. Even today, I'm at work and, wishing I made more money or, so here's a great example, right? I got a promotion like a week ago. Talking about promotions. I got a promotion like a week ago, right? And then 6 months from now, I'm supposed to take over the boss's job, right? He's leaving in 6 months. So he gets fired a week after I start. And so I'm supposed to take this guy's job in 6 months. So I'm like, go to the boss. I say, hey, I want to be considered for the position, because I'm supposed to get it in 6 months.
Yeah.
They hire someone else. And I'm like, these motherfuckers, like, how are you not going to hire me? And it's like, literally, Vinny, like, you literally just got a raise. Like, who cares? Like, right. Like, you're so selfish that, like, you just got, like, a pretty significant raise, too. Nothing, nothing groundbreaking, but, like, something that people would be super happy at. And, like, how quickly I go from being in gratitude to being, like, ungrateful and being, like, how dare you people don't think I'm worthy of this position? You know what I'm saying? And it's like, dude, like, when they talk about staying small and staying humble, it's like, I got to remind myself, dude, like, you don't even, you've worked hard to be where you're at, but like, if life was fair, like, you shouldn't even be here, dude. Like, you shouldn't even be on this planet anymore, much less sitting here bitching about some guy who's probably more qualified than you, who got the job over you. Like, just be grateful for where you're at. And like, if I can stay in gratitude, man, like, I can handle almost anything with a positive attitude. But it's when I get all caught up in myself and I forget how far I've came. Like, I was a low bottom gutter drug addict, and like, here I am sitting in a podcast studio talking into like a microphone with headphones on.
Right.
And shit. Like, dude, like, this is like so far from anything that I ever thought I would. And like, this is like the second time I've done this too, like, it's not even the first, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's just, I don't know, man, like, life has been such a trip, but I just gotta stay small. And if I can stay small and realize that, like, everything I've got today is a direct result from working the program and trying to build a relationship with someone greater than myself.
Right.
Like, I believe that it's just going to keep getting better. And I know that there's going to be hard times. I know it. But like, if I can just remind myself that, like, just because you got sober doesn't mean life doesn't happen. I know you lost your grandpa, and you're talking about this last year, like, that's life, man, and that sucks. And like, but like, look at you, you were able to go back home, you were able to be with your family and like spend some time with them, be present with your mother, and like be a supportive son to her, I remember you telling us stories about hanging out with him in the house, and he was like a father figure to you, right?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, he was, my mother, when I was growing up, was actually an alcoholic, and my grandfather was also so there's a history in the family of substance abuse, primarily, absolutely mostly alcohol, and so it was just kind of interesting because I hear stories about how he used to be an alcoholic, and then then my mother was so there's all these stories that I hear. I never got to really experience him in that way, right? I was really lucky to have the best of him. You know what I'm saying? After all these things, have happened, and I spent a lot of time with him and my grandmother, and other family members, really, this whole, this idea of it takes a village. We were definitely putting that into practice, no matter what happened, I had a really solid group of people around, to help me, through various things. I had some really great mentors. Him being one of them. There's so many things even up to today that I do, like, wearing glasses all the time, wearing a hat. Those are things I got, from him, really, cause the way I viewed him, I mean, he was, if I didn't, acknowledge, a power greater than myself, meaning that, I have a spiritual life and I acknowledge that, there's something greater than myself. He'd be it.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So, I took on a lot of that and, it's been quite a process, dealing with, just processing, the fact that he's still not with us, as a patriarch, and kind of seeing some of the things how things are unfolding, because it's still very early, right? Some families just completely fall apart. That hasn't been the case with us. If anything, now more than ever, especially for myself, I was talking to Owen about this. I'm kind of a connector. I reach out to all the far-reaching, like the corners of the family. I'm that guy who knows what's going on with this person, because I think as the oldest grandchild, one of the first, I just, all of these people were around me. You know what I'm saying? I was everyone's favorite nephew.
You were the firstborn.
Right. Yeah. You were the only one. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So yeah, I'm just fortunate to have these kind of relationships, and, life is definitely not, perfect, and you have to learn how to, live life on its terms. You know what I'm saying? And I understand what you're talking about, this control, component. It's something that I've really come to a place where I just understand that all I have is the illusion of control. There's only so much that I can prepare. Okay. And I do, as this guy.
Yeah, he does.
Okay. I do everything that I can, but, I also go into it, I wouldn't say with no expectations, but I manage them as well as I can. Understanding that the outcome is dependent on so many variables. Literally, there's so many things in our lives that we don't acknowledge. The stars have to align the right way for some of those things to happen. For you to be born in the family you were born in good conditions, there's so many things went right. And who knows, maybe some things actually went wrong. Maybe you were supposed to end up somewhere else with a really shitty family, right? But somehow when it went wrong, you ended up where you were supposed to be, and you were in a great home. You know what I'm saying? So who knows how these things actually happen?
Yeah, I think it's funny because I'm starting to see, and it's funny because I don't see it in the moment, but when the moment passes, I'm starting to see that everything we experience, or I've experienced, I was right there because I needed to be right there.
Yeah.
Good or bad, some of the worst things I've experienced have brought me some of the greatest gifts in life. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
And I couldn't see it in the moment, right? Early sobriety. I remember these guys telling me, oh, we're going to go do these things, when you're 6 months sober.
Yeah.
And I was like, dude, no way. I couldn't fathom picking up, 90 days, much less 6 months, 9 days to begin with, right?
Absolutely,
forget 90 days.
Right.
I'm trying to look at 9 days or 9 hours.
Right. Yeah.
And here it is, years later, and it's just a trip. But I feel like life knows where I need to be more than I know where I need to be.
Yeah.
And if I can keep that open-mindedness to the fact that you don't know what's best for you, and maybe you're right here right now because this is where you need to be right now. And if I can embrace that kind of an attitude in any sort of situation, I think that it can help me in the long run.
Right.
And trying to believe that, I'm here for a reason, my belief or my spirituality or whatever I believe in hasn't brought me here to just dump me off,
It's a great point.
And it's if I can stay in that state of believing that I'm not alone, and I don't, and the beauty, you're talking about these strong family ties too. I've been so lucky. You talking about, having a higher power. That was my father too as a kid growing up. It was your grandpa. It was my father. My dad was just this. I still to this day I say, if I could do a quarter of the things he does, when I die, I would be happy. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And he just was, overcame a immense amount of adversity, and to see where, his life is today is just kind of hard to fathom. Sometimes when I think, I've had it tough, it's you really got to put in perspective of the fact that a lot of your adversity was kind of self-induced, Vinny. like nobody put these circumstances, like you weren't born in a bad neighborhood or a bad country, or I didn't have any sort of health issues. All this stuff was self-inflicted. So like to a certain extent, it's like you gotta remind yourself that no one did this to yourself. So you're fully capable of climbing out of this hole when you're ready to change that attitude around and do something about it. And it took me a long time to have that willingness. I think one of the greatest gifts too is like just, without trying to sound vain or anything like that, but being able to try to help other people. And I don't do it all day, every day, but like some of these opportunities I've had to help people, it's just unbelievable. And whether it's, the closest thing to getting high or using a drug or a drink today, the only thing that's come close to that feeling, sometimes like when you're really being of service to someone else, it's like almost feels as good as like, changing the way, like I think you release so many endorphins in your brain because you feel so good about like, like you ever help somebody and been like, wow, like I really helped this person. Like, and it wasn't about me, but just like seeing that this person really appreciated what you did for them.
Right.
And it's like, wow, like that was like a natural high, like this feeling of being of service to another human being, or just being another human to someone else and trying to, just relate to him. There's a guy that we see outside of this restaurant we go to all the time, and I've gotten to know him by his first name, and he's just like a really nice guy. I don't know. It's just funny to like build a relationship with somebody who's still out there like living on the streets. Really, and they remember me too, which is like crazy. It's like, and that's kind of sad too, because it's like, here's somebody who isn't completely checked out in life. Like he remembers who I am every time I see him. Right. And it really just makes you be grateful, because it's like, man, you're one bad decision away from hanging out with this guy at night.
100%, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think, just to address what you're saying about this guy, right? And the way he remembers you, there was a documentary or, a special something I watched, right? And companionship is one of the things that when you're on the street, it means so much. Like, like loneliness is such a big deal. And I think, maybe the way he values, just those small interactions is a lot different than the way we would, right? He's so grateful, especially if, every time you come by and, you see him, you're positive, right? And you have good vibes, right? He remembers that because what he has to deal with on the street, he's always looking out, for himself. There's a safety issue, on top of loneliness, on top of all, who knows what else, And so, I think that's a great point to bring up. We encounter, people in our neighborhood, where we're at, man. We were talking about this. Did we talk about it last time? Or who were we talking to about how, and like, because of how much time we spend in that neighborhood, over time you get to know some of these people a lot closer than most people would ever even think to do.
Yeah. I find it interesting. I was with somebody who wasn't from our neighborhood, and I used to be this person, so I can say this. And I noticed they were naturally uncomfortable, right? Because there was a woman laying on the sidewalk with a blanket.
Yeah.
And, in the past, I would have done the same thing where you just kind of act like it's not happening, right? But this lady was like, hey, how are you? And I was like, oh, we're doing pretty good. How are you doing? Just a normal interaction that I might have with anyone, And I noticed how this person I was with, it made them slightly uncomfortable. Not anything where they were, I didn't think anything less of them because I got it, right? Because you sort of get used to, like, I don't want to see that. I don't want to deal with it. I can't fix it. So I'm just going to pretend it's not there, right? Whereas because of where I've been and because of where we live, I'm totally comfortable now doing that, because again, I realize that's where I had to get to before I got sober, right?
What makes, I think, people uncomfortable too, but I also think it opens up that channel for empathy for people is like, so with this guy I was talking about, for example, like he drive past people all the time, right? Begging for, or asking for a buck or whatever, and sometimes you give him $1, sometimes you don't, right? But like when you sit down and you talk to this person and like you hear that this person like had a life before they lived on the streets, right? Like this person had a job, he had a girlfriend, and then they start telling you, oh, you know, so-and-so left, you know, we had a bad breakup. I took it real hard, you know, I started drinking a little bit, whatever. Couldn't, you know, life circumstances, you know, like you got to remember that this person wasn't a 35 or a 45 or 50-year-old person who was born on the streets. Like something happened in this person's life that was like very heavy at some point to lead them to where they're at. And like when you sit down and you talk with somebody and you hear that story of how they got there, man, like it is really hard for you not to, it's really hard to walk past somebody and not, you know, you see people walk through all the time and their blinders on and they're saying, hey, you know, get a job, you know, or why can't you get it together? But it's like when you start humanizing people and you realize that this is a person too who something happened and that's why they're here. And it's just very hard for you to go back to being a person who walks past people every day and not have empathy for them. And, you know, like today I can't go back to that person who like, I was like, well, these fucking people just, you know, always wanting something for free. It's like, no, dude, like, you know, it just, I don't know. When you get to know somebody and you experience like, or you hear from them and you hear that story, like, you know, with this guy, his name's Thomas, but you're hearing that story of like how he got there is like, you know, it's really hard to not have, it invokes an emotion, and because of these emotions, you can't help but empathize and have compassion for this person because, like, he wasn't always here. You know, this was a person who was a functioning member of society not long ago, and they haven't been able to bounce back from a particular situation, and now this is their life. And I think you were dead on with the fact, the sense of community, right? Because, like, we'll get, you know, when I see him, you know, the other day, you bought him some food, right? You know, and then I said, oh, you want some food or you want some money? You know, and this is somebody living on the streets, you know, hey man, if you'd rather spend $5 on a beer tonight than eat, that's on you, man. Cause like, I don't know what you're going through. So maybe you want to drink more than you want some food. And that's cool, man, because I'm not living on the streets. I don't know what you're feeling. So, but you know, we sat down, we had this 20-minute conversation, and he, at the end of it, he was just like, I really needed that. You know, like I really needed that. Yeah. And you hit the nail on the head. Like I literally, like, he needed to talk for 20 minutes more than he needed the $5 I gave him. Yeah. You know? And that was like, you know, and it's just, I think if we could all just be a little bit more kind to each other, it could change, you know, a lot could change, but it's just, we get so caught up in our own lives too, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then on a completely different note, there's a TV show called Twin Peaks. You ever watch it?
I haven't seen it yet, no.
It's a classic, right? So there's this thing that says the owls aren't what they seem. And there was a guy begging for change today, right? And he was like, the owls definitely aren't what they seem. He was like, I saw a 6-foot white owl. And he just like had this crazy elaborate story. I was like, here you go, sir. Here's a buck. I love that story. But, I don't know. It's just like, but like this guy, you know, I don't know. It's just, how do you get there? Yeah. And,
well, and I think, you know, that's kind of what the 12-step community is. Cause you can, I know at least all the groups that I've been involved in, somebody can walk in there and there's no judgment, right? Because, and I almost wish there was like a 12-step community for the homeless or something, right? Because I guess not all of them are suffering from addiction. I think a lot of it though has to do with addiction, and mental health. I mean, from what we've seen, and the two can go hand in hand because a lot of times people end up using substances to fix a mental health problem that's undiagnosed, and then they end up just not able to function in society. And next thing you know, they're on the street. But I do love the fact about community in the 12 steps where, you know, it doesn't matter if you smell, it doesn't matter what's going on. Everyone is equal in that meeting, at least in an ideal situation. And in the groups that work, that's how it is, right? So this guy we have people that come into the, where we work who we would normally not let in the building. But during that time period, where we open our doors and say, this is a meeting for anyone who qualifies. And as you know, all you need to qualify is to say, I have a desire to stop drinking today. Like, that's it.
Right.
And they come in, and for that time period, they aren't the guy living on the street. They're a fully fledged member of the community. And that may be the time that they can change, right? That may be the thing that they need to just be human, right? Because what you really did was treat that guy like he was a human being. And I think so many people who have sort of fallen on the, through the cracks of our society no longer get that experience.
Mm. And I think just with that example too is like we treated each other like humans. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't like we were on this level playing field.
Right.
Like I wasn't treating you like a homeless guy. We were just talking to each other like two guys who were shooting the shit for 20 minutes. Because I think at times too people don't want to be treated like like they're struggling. Like I think he just wanted to like kick the shit,
Right.
Yeah. And it was
talk
like,
about the sports or something,
like,
right?
hey, you hungry? No, I'm good. Okay. Well, what's been up? What's going on? And leave it at that, and wherever it went. And, I don't know, man. I think you're right. If we could all just realize that, money, material shit, none of this really matters, dude, because you ain't taking none of it with you.
None of it.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah, absolutely.
I mean, and don't get me wrong, like, I want to make a lot of it while I'm here, or as much of it as I can.
Yeah,
Like, I don't want to be struggling the rest of my life. I don't. I'd be lying if I sat here and said, like, oh, I'm cool with making minimum wage the rest of my life. Like, no, I got aspirations and goals in life, but, like, at the end of the day, like, if I can share some of it with someone else, like, that's more rewarding than earning it, is sharing it and seeing like somebody be grateful for what I can share, whether it's my time, my energy, something financial, a piece of advice, whatever it may be. If I can share something and somebody appreciates that,
right?
Fuck, man, that's the most rewarding thing I've ever had, is like that feeling of being able to share something and somebody appreciates it, And like I said, whether it's a material thing or, a piece of advice or just my time, if I can give it and they want it, like, I'm more than happy to do it, because I don't know, like, cashing a paycheck never felt as good as like someone appreciating you for who you are.
Absolutely. So you answered one of the questions. So I feel like we're getting towards the end now, but one of the questions I had, is why is it so important for you to help people? And I think that right there is, such a, great, answer. I mean, do you have anything to add? If I was to ask that question, why is it so important, to reach out and help people?
Because if people hadn't reached out and helped me, I wouldn't be here. Like, point blank period. Like, it took a lot of people, that had a lot of patience and never gave up on me, and the people that gave up on me, but at one point they were helping, just because somebody did it for me, and I got to keep doing that, because that's how this thing works for me, is like, I can't keep this shit I got unless, like, I give it away, and whenever I give it away, it comes back tenfold.
Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah, that's a great answer. And I can relate to that, myself. That's why when we decided to start all of this, right, I first came up with the whole idea, and, all these things, it started at one place, ended up, with a podcast as being the first step, right? And I asked myself, why are you doing this, right? And anything I do going forward, I want, whatever venture it is, I have to be impacting lives. Because that's what feeds my spirit. So it's kind of like a very selfish reason, but if I'm going to be selfish, I think that's how I want to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if you're going to be making a career out of it, man, I mean, I'll tell you one thing, my 9 to 5, like, sucks my soul out. So if I could make some sort of a living, like, trying to impact people in a positive way, and that would be ideal, And so, like you're talking about, even having this side venture right here, it's like you're making a positive impact. And hey, you got 100 followers. Like, well, you've affected 100 people in a positive way.
Absolutely, and
that's awesome.
It means so much.
Yes,
it means so much. So, and another question I have is, so recently, we had Jacob in the studio, and the topic of discussion was alternative spirituality, and what it's in relation to the 12-step community, right? Because some people not everyone is, a Christian, or, follows Islam, or, any of these, larger, religious or spiritual groups, right? Mm-hmm. So, we talked to him about how he approached that, right? While he was talking about that, he brought up a point about recovery, and he said that he talked about how in our current stages of change model, right? There's, pre-contemplation and contemplation, which means like you're thinking about getting sober and, getting clean. And then you go into the process of doing that, you're in recovery. And then, the last stage is basically maintenance, right? So we talked about how it seems like we don't talk about it very much, but, if you're always in maintenance and then after maintenance, there's no stage that says, I don't know, recovered.
Right. Transcendence.
Then you're always, if you can't transcend, you know what I'm saying? If you're always in maintenance, right? I mean, after that, the logical next step, based on our current stages of change model, is that you end up using again, and then you go back to pre-contemplation. So we just have this, I really want to ask everyone who comes and gives a sobriety story this question. Do you think there's such a thing as recovered? And if so, what does that look like? And if not, why? And maybe a more fair question to start with is, how do you define recovery? Like, how do you define recovery?
That's a pretty loaded question. It's a lot in there.
Yeah.
There is a lot in there, but so like, just think about it in as few words as possible. How would you, define recovery? Or what does it mean to you personally?
Your first one about being recovered, I also think that you were saying the idea of, well, if you just maintain, and you're never recovered, the next inevitable thing is relapse.
Right.
But I don't know if I agree with that, because if you're just looking at life as and I also think we're not only maintaining, but we're growing through maintaining. And like, there's a difference between maintaining, because maintaining means we're doing, nobody can see this, but we're doing this flat line where we're not going up, we're not going down.
Okay, yeah.
We're just on a level plane. Whereas like, if we're maintaining but also growing, we're going on an upward incline, right? So like, I feel like through maintenance and through the practice of maintenance, I learn new things that can now become a daily practice just by continuing to try to maintain this, or saying, hey, I'm maintaining this spiritual practice and it's getting stale. I need to try to do something different. And only because of the maintenance of that practice do I realize that I need to elevate it. And if I elevate it, now it's like, okay, as long as we're continuing to grow, or, I think, for me, you know what the only thing coasting's good for? Going downhill.
Yeah, there you go.
You know what I'm saying? So,
like it.
Right.
So it's like, as long as I continue to try to learn and grow, then maintenance is okay. I think that's okay, because I don't think maintenance means inevitable relapse, because I also feel like, in my mind, when I use the word recovered, that means there's no need to maintain anything anymore. I'm healed. I'm clean. Okay. I'm good. For me, that's what, that's the way I broke down that question. Okay. So, I think that I need maintenance. Through maintenance, I learn, I grow, I try different things. I see what works. I see what doesn't work. And I just keep moving forward. I think through maintenance, it allows me not to backslide. It allows me to, just by doing those acts, I have no choice but to grow. It's when I stop doing that now I'm going to backslide or possibly go in reverse. And then recovery, man, recovery is just, it's so much to me today. Like, recovery means so much more than going to a meeting or meeting my sponsor. Recovery has, taught me how to live my life, how to go home and try to be like, a decent boyfriend to my girlfriend, how to, pick up my mom's calls when I know she's going to want to talk for 20 minutes and I'm not really in the mood, but like, I want to be a good son to her. And how many times did I neglect her for years and years? And how many times did she lay awake worrying about me? And now she doesn't have to worry about me. And, oh, your life's too good to pick up her phone call. Like, pick up the fucking phone, dude. And like, listen to her talk and like have the shitty connection you always have with her on the cell phone service and have to repeat everything. But it's like, it's not about, recovery, if I could sum it up, is it's not about me today. And if I can keep that in the forefront of my mind, that if I can live my life and know that it's not about me, at the end of the day, my life is pretty good. And if I can act in accordance with that idea, chances are I'm not going to drink or get high today if I'm thinking about someone else.
All right.
So
You know what's fascinating? That question about recovered or transcendence or maintenance is your definition of maintenance is almost the same definition of somebody who describes themselves as recovered, in the sense that when you keep moving forward, right, when you keep building and learning new things, you eventually get to this place, I think, that taking a drink doesn't solve the problem, right? Because we had posed the question, how, if a doctor tomorrow, right, were to say to the world, hey, look, I've fixed addiction, and you just take this pill, and now you can have a beer and get a little drunk, but you won't have that compulsion, right? And the point being that at a certain level of growth, like, it wouldn't even be a thing anymore. Like, you're like, you know what? Getting drunk doesn't even fit in with my plans for what I'm trying to do today.
Right. It doesn't fix the problem that it used to fix. Doesn't exist anymore in that way. You know what I'm saying? Like your what you're working on now is something different. And in that sense, right? Are there levels, right? So you start out at one point. You are in recovery. You get to a certain point where now, I mean, you're the things that are challenging you and that you're working on are completely different from the guy at the beginning, right? And so in that sense, right, do we reach various levels of, like we've recovered from that one and now we're in the next phase? Is that, a thing? You know what I'm saying?
I don't know.
So, cause I was actually with Jacob last night. And so us guys are chilling, having a burger and we started talking about this and how we'd like to have this discussion with as many people as we can. Cause I don't think it's the less traveled, road, right? Just to see what people have to say. And so he posed this. He said, when you go into surgery, right? You had a heart problem. You go into surgery, they operate and you're released, okay? You get to a point where you've recovered from that, right? You don't continue life saying that you're in recovery from, heart surgery. You at some point you've actually recovered from that. And now, if anything, there's a different part of that process that you're still, it's a continued thing, right? Like if you get your leg amputated, you recover from the initial stages. Right. And then now you're continuing with like rehab. You have to relearn how to walk and, and all of these things. There's various stages, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think, that was, kind of the idea that was, so that's where that whole idea came from. And I think it's an interesting debate and I'd love to hear what, people, have to say about it.
Yeah, and I think you could go on and on with that conversation for a while. I think for me, I personally don't like the word recovered because I feel like if I think I'm recovered at some point, I'm going to lose sight of where I came from. And if I'm an active member in my own recovery, then there's something to work on.
Right. Yeah. No,
I feel like if I'm recovered, what's there to work on?
Yeah, I totally get it. I think it's almost semantics in a way, right?
Yeah.
Because it's a way of, sorry to cut you off, it's a way of remembering, right?
Yeah, it helps me to remember, and I don't ever want to forget where I came from. Aaron had mentioned also this idea that if you could take a pill to be able to drink and recreationally, I think the only idea of why that wouldn't work for me is not so much that I want to work, but because of working a 12-step program, it's instilled like principles and values in me that if I didn't have that, even if I could use, I still wouldn't be the person that I'm proud to be today. And I think that's a big difference between this idea of just not being an addict or an alcoholic and being a person in recovery is so much more than just not using or drinking anymore. It's, this idea of being kind and tolerant and loving towards other people and, having empathy for others and all these other, ideas that have come along through working this program, and that by just taking a pill or just stopping, these ideas would have never been planted in me. And so even if there was a solution as simple as taking some sort of medication, I would be a better person, because I wouldn't be hurting people because of drugs and alcohol.
Yeah.
But I also probably wouldn't be helping people or trying to help people like I am today because of working a program and having these principles put before me and seeing people practice them long before I showed up. So when I showed up, they were living examples of what it looked like.
Yeah. I tend to completely agree in the sense that my spiritual journey leads me to the understanding that my identity or how I became an alcoholic is irrelevant, because what it did for me was lead me to a place where I was able to grow in a way that I otherwise wouldn't have been able to grow. So for instance, if I hadn't been an alcoholic, would I be a kind, considerate, humble person, or would I be completely full of myself? Would I be materially more successful? I think I would, but would I be as good of a person as I define good now? The answer is, I think, definitely not. And it's kind of looking at it from a different perspective, but yeah, so if we solved the problem of addiction with a pill, would the world actually have less good people in it who would overcome something by transforming themselves into something that's good? Because I think no matter how you look at it, when you look at somebody with long-term sobriety, it like forces you to become a decent person. When they tell you like, so here's the thing, man, you're not going to get sober if you don't at least adopt some spiritual principles. And even when we talked to Jacob about alternative spirituality, he still lives by spiritual principles that whatever his internal belief system is, are good. He helps people. He's
100%,
kind.
yes.
You know what I mean? And it's funny how that is what we've arrived at as this solution to this overwhelming problem that was debilitating. Mm-hmm. And that what is, definitely that's what moral psychology is, and that's what the 12 steps are. So it's a fascinating debate, right? And I love that the whole point is not forgetting where you came from, because lack of spiritual progress will lead us to relapse. And when you hear about people who have 7-8 years, that is scary, because you're like, that I want to have 7 or 8 years, but I don't want to relapse. So what can I learn from that? And what's interesting is you both sort of live by that same ethos, because I like how you talked about earlier. Eventually you get beaten down so much that you're like, just tell me what to do. Like, you know what? I used to have a lot of objections and reasons. Right now, you have something I don't, which is called being sober, and you look happy, and I'm miserable. So why don't I just follow you around and do what you do? Because I'm done, right? And then it seems like that's like the key to the beginning, but then the key to long-term sobriety seems to be this idea: I don't stop. And even when you call yourself recovered, the people who do it successfully haven't stopped growing and accomplishing.
Yeah. Right. That's a common denominator,
right?
Amongst those two people. Yeah.
Man, this is just fascinating stuff. I love talking about this.
It definitely is.
And your journey is intense, Man, I'm just so grateful. And I think that's another thing too. You're grateful and you get it.
You can't, I don't know how I couldn't be, even on a daily basis, I'm not grateful, 70% of the day, but like when I sit down and I tell someone about it, it's like, how can you not have a certain amount of gratitude when you look back on like where you've come from and where you're at today? It's like, man, there's definitely something else working in this universe other than my best intentions, because I did not dream up or scheme any of this up. It just unfolded this way, and it was all by trying to just be a better person today than I was yesterday.
Yeah. Man.
Yeah, absolutely, man. That is such a great story, and we're gonna have more people come, and speak their stories, because there's so many different factors. We don't all come into this thing with a similar thread, but so many different details. And I loved that you touched on the fact that you didn't. There isn't this gloom and doom beginning to like your story. No, everything was cool. Great environment, and so it's good for people to see those differences, and I like that you spoke about, it doesn't discriminate. Mm-hmm. Yeah, man, I really like that we had this talk, because now I know, see, that's the other thing. I get to bond with people a lot more. Like, I know a lot more about you. The way I view you has forever changed. Even if it's just
Hopefully
a little
not
bit.
too bad.
Even if it's just a little bit. Oh no, man, dude. One day everyone will find out my dirt, man. I have zero room, okay, to judge anyone, man. That's for sure.
Well, I love it all the time how that one metaphor from the book that we are all very familiar with, which is like we are like passengers on an ocean liner, and while we otherwise in another life we might not have ever met, in this one we have survived this great calamity and we have this thing in common, and we have it in common with people all over the world.
Yes.
Who we can share this thing with that. At one point you're very embarrassed and not proud about it, but at another point you just get to this level where you're like, for whatever it is, I'm grateful for it. And this guy over here who I never met before, I know in some small way is exactly like I am.
Yeah. The
Or a
shipwreck
large way.
analogy. Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah. It's an equalizer. It doesn't matter what culture, so many different factors, right? But if you identify each other as people that have been through that, same journey, instantly, man, like, you just get it.
Yeah.
Right. Which is why we're different from, people, like, let's say, someone's, dad or mom dies or whatever it is, they're like, oh man, I know how you feel. I'm like, I don't know. I don't know if you actually do know unless you've been through that thing. Right. So there's a lot of situations like that, but in our case, it's definitely, it's a unifier. What happened was not great, but, we're unified by it. Man, Vinny, it's been amazing having you on.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I think
Thank you for having me.
the idea that you gave off air was great. We should maybe have a round table around that topic, which we are going to do at some point. We just think that if we're going to have that discussion, it really deserves as much preparation as possible, and to get a good round table together of people with different opinions, some of the OGs and, different, a nice mix.
Yeah.
Nice mix of, opinions.
Yeah, there's plenty of them out there. We all got one.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. Exactly. We need just the right one so that we don't also have to hire security, because it can get, it's very close to like religion. People will be get passionate. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's going to get heated regardless.
Oh, yeah.
But that's great.
But if you're practicing the principles right, you'll be able to be okay with someone else's opinion.
Sure.
Dude,
you got to come back. I think we can. You got to come back. Yeah.
We can end it on that. That was a great thing to say to just kind of cap it all off. So yeah, Vinny, thank you so much for coming. We are so grateful, for your generosity, just agreeing to share that story with us and with hundreds of other people. It's a big deal. And really the reason we're doing this again is so that people out there that have been affected, by, a brother, sister, son, whatever it is, that maybe didn't understand some things, maybe they gain some understanding from this. For people who are currently, have someone in the home perhaps, that is going through this, maybe if they listen to this, they understand a little bit more. And they don't feel like so alone, because the saddest thing about, our family members and people around us that are affected directly, by this disease of addiction, is that they don't get to be numb. The person using, alcohol or drugs, is able to be numb through this, but they don't, right? So they're just taking the hits, man.
Yeah.
And so, we're definitely doing this for them as well. Yeah, man. So with that, we're going to bring this to an end. We thank everyone for listening. If you would like to catch up with us, feel free to do so. You can find us at our website. That's www.2teachone.com. That's www.2teach1.com. Or you can find us on Facebook and Instagram at TWOTEACHONE.
2teachone.
To Teach One. To simplify everything, you could just Google us. Just Google To Teach One, and that's going to be the number 2 TEACHONE. You can find us.
All right.
Stuff.
You'll find all our stuff. Okay.
Keep up the good work.
Thank you very
Thank you,
much.
Vinny.
Like, share, and subscribe, and please leave us a review. We're gonna follow this up with a little introductory, talk with our videographer. We're moving on to the next step. We're gonna take this to YouTube and other platforms also. So, Sam's behind the camera right now. We're gonna officially introduce her. So we're gonna cut this here, and
We'll be back.
we'll have a short video
Thank you so much
introducing
again,
her.
Vinny.
Thank you very much. Thanks.